Today I'm going to do a reading from my new book, Doctors, Lawyers, Indian Chiefs. But I haven't selected my own words to read, but rather I'm going to read a 1924 interview with Pop Warner in which he talks about the courage of some of his Indian players. Two men who were dallying with death and should have been in hospital, a third who would have looked well in an invalid's chair, two pieces of leather which joined together closely resembled a puttee, and finally a brace of aluminum plate that resembled nothing so much as the rubbing portion of a washboard. These were the chief factors in making possible a strategy that decided one of the most sensational football battles I ever saw. It was way back in 1902, during my first term of coaching the famous Carlisle Indian team. In those days, our annual game with Cornell was one of the biggest events of the season, notwithstanding that during the course of the hectic schedule, which the Indians always played, we were apt to engage almost every important team in the country. We set a lot of store on winning from the Ithacans, but this year, as the game approached, it looked as if victory was going to be impossible. In earlier games, hard luck gave us a kick that sent us reeling, and Saturday, October 18th, the day set for our engagement with Cornell, didn't promise to be an occasion for jubilee. To begin with, my brother Bill had been a big help. Bill was a guard at Cornell and one of the best in the game. This year he was captain of the team and mighty anxious to have it make good. Cornell didn't start its training season until September 15th, while the Indians got into action on September 1st. I could picture the rest of my brother's thoughts. He stood over 6'1" himself and weighed 220 pounds. The Cornell center, Davitt, and the left guard, Hunt, were built in the same proportions. Nobody ever had punctured the Ithacans' lines while those lads were holding forth, but they had done a lot of damage to the other fellow's defense. So I knew Bill was going back to Cornell to tell his comrades just what he was thinking then, namely, that the Ithacans must keep possession of the ball when they met us a month later and batter our line to pieces. And I had a hunch that the formation he would have in mind for accomplishing this purpose would be their famous guards back play. In that, one guard got back of the other to carry the ball, with a whole backfield in tandem formation, helping them to plow through the enemy's line. Just then, everything went wrong. First, after the initial game of the season, Wheelock, our star left tackle, probably the best man in the position that year, and the leading drop and place kicker, who did all our booting, was taken sick and sent to the school infirmary. He was thought to have pneumonia, but that was averted, and then he had a recurrence of pleurisy from which he had suffered the previous year. His pain was so great that he couldn't bear even to have the bedclothes touch him, and the hospital attendants had to rig up a special apparatus that suspended his sheet above him an inch away, that they protected him without coming in contact with his body. Second, Exendine, our great right end, wrenched his ankle so badly in a succeeding game he could scarcely run. Third, Shochuk, who played at center and was as good as there was in the country, was so badly hurt the week before the Cornell game he had to be placed in the hospital. There I was, with this big battle less than a week away, with a line that my brother Bill had called only pretty good, completely shot to pieces. What could I do? Exendine partly solved my troubles. He insisted he would play despite his bad ankle. It was out of the question for him to take his end assignment. We bound his crippled limb with tape so tightly that he couldn't move his foot and shifted him to right tackle, sending Whiteley, who played the position regularly, to fill the left tackle place vacated by Wheelock's illness. But I still had no center and no right end. I could throw in a center that might fill Shochuk's shoes acceptably, but I could not replace Wheelock, whose kicking would be sadly missed. He was my best offensive weapon, having made at least one field goal in every game he played. It was at this time I was given two demonstrations of the red man's courage, which fully upheld all the legends of the historical indifference to suffering ever told. In 1901, when he played the Navy at Annapolis, Lubo, our left tackle, a thin, wiry fellow who made up in bravery and football brains what he lacked in size, he only weighed 160 pounds, had his left wrist smashed and cut open. The injury was slow to heal. We didn't tell him at the time, but the school physician thought he had a tubercular infection. The superintendent of the academy positively refused to let him play any more football. His arm was placed in a sling, and he was instructed to indulge in no exercise except walking, and even then he must conserve his strength. Lubo couldn't play, but there was nothing to prevent his watching his teammates during practice. Throughout my brother Bill's sojourn, he trudged up and down the field, observing everything that was done, listening to everything that was said. He was a true Indian, talking little but retaining every scrap of information that came his way, although in this case it could be of no value to him. He was really a pathetic figure. In form, he would have been a tower of strength for us, for despite his size, he could hold his own against the huskiest of opponents. But he had been carrying his arm in a sling for a year now, and it was shriveled away almost to mere bone. All the time, he was hoping against hope that luck would turn his way. At the start of the season, he applied for permission to play, but the superintendent's only reply was an order to me. "Don't even give him a uniform," he said. "His health means more to the school than winning a couple of football games." Nevertheless, he continued his appeals, and when the injury to Shochuk capped the climax of our troubles, he decided to make one more try. 4 nights preceding the Cornell game, a knock brought me to my door. There stood Lubo. "Coach," he said without any preliminary, "I'd give anything if I could play against Cornell. I know how Shochuk and Wheelock can't play. I'd like to go up there for you and for Carlisle." I brought him inside and explained as gently as I could that it wasn't possible. "Not with that arm," I said. "But that wouldn't make any difference," he protested. "I've been exercising and have kept in good shape in every other way. Besides, Coach, I think I can do as much with my right arm as with 2 arms. I can protect my left so it won't get hurt." I asked him where he thought he could play. "Tackle, in Wheelock's place." "Nope, that's out of the question. A tackle must have both arms." "Well then, center." "No, a center must use both hands to pass the ball." "Well," he declared, "I know I could play somewhere in the team." I had to tell him it was impossible, although I appreciated his spirit. But when he left, after 2 hours of argument, he insisted, "Somehow I'm going to play." As to when he saw the superintendent, I don't know, for it was 10:30 when he left my house. But the next morning the chief telephoned me to come to his office. Lubo had been to see him again, he said, and had asked to be allowed to face Cornell. I told him no, he added, but the boy said he must play. He owed it to Carlisle. He's so fine I'm inclined to be lenient if you and the doctor think it is possible. I didn't, because I believed Lubo would be performing merely on his ambition. But when the physician told me that, except for his left arm, the Indian was in fine condition, I began to change my mind. We could at least let him practice a bit. I told him so the next day, which was the Wednesday preceding the date at Ithaca on Saturday.